Francisco d'Ancona.
Watching, we know you.
Assalamu alaikum, welcome to another episode of Face to Face with me, Azhar Ali. Alhamdulillah, again this week I'm happy to say Dr. Sadiq Hamid is joining me. As mentioned, Dr. Hamid has over 30 years of activism experience. He's a professional youth worker and community development worker as well as a teacher and researcher at universities like Chester, Liverpool Hope University, and most recently the Oxford Islamic Centre in Oxford. And of course he's written a well-known book, Sufis, Salafis and Islamists, and the kind of fight for the activist ground, as it were. Jazakallah khair for joining us again, Dr. Hamid. This week we want to kind of focus a little bit more, which is something you do cover in your book and also in your other work as well. Young people in particular, Muslim youth, and some of the challenges they're facing. I mean, from your studies, I mean, what stands out for you?
I think, thank you for inviting me back. I think perhaps if I had to pin down one thing in terms of challenges for us as a community in relation to our youth, is the issue of identity and maintaining, successfully transmitting and maintaining and nurturing a faith-based identity, essentially remaining Muslims, because at the moment I think we have, unfortunately, a continuation of collectively a failure of keeping our young people within our institutions after they don't have to be there. So this image here of people being in the masjid, going to the maktab and madrasa, or after school they go to the masjid to learn basics of Islam. That's great, but beyond that, what are we doing in our communities? What are we doing in our masajid? And aside from maybe 10-15% of the masjids are not youth-friendly places, unfortunately. And I think it's a real shame. That does explain why young people then become alienated from the masjid, and that as a consequence they can become alienated from their faith. And it's also to do with the wider society. Let's be honest.
Just on the masjid bit, I think, I mean, as you were saying, I just kind of remembered when we were younger, perhaps younger people were less allowed in the masjid, as it were, especially if they were misbehaving and everything else. I mean, I remember announcements, like, kids, go downstairs, the prayer's starting or something, they'd be moved away. Is it still like that in your experience, or has it improved? Do you feel that there is a bit more of a welcoming atmosphere?
Well, I think it's a mixed picture. Again, from what I've seen up and down the country, we have places like East London Mosque is a great example, because it is, by its mission, it intends to bring young people to the masjid and stimulate them and nurture them to be committed to their faith. And it has organisations there, it has services, it has sports, recreation, and a whole array of impressive services for young people. Okay, and hence that's why it's one of the few places that is packed even during outside of Jummah and Ramadan. When you go to the average mosque, your local mosque, you will be lucky to see a young person in any of the 5 daily prayers. They will maybe turn up in Jummah, but even that's changing now. And why is that? I think we really have to ask ourselves, why are our young people so reluctant to come to the mosque?
I mean, one of the topics we covered on this program was, in particular, youth violence, and in the inner cities where you have a lot of knife crimes and gang culture and everything else. Obviously, in the wider society, there's been huge cuts in youth provisions, if you like. When we were growing up, there were youth centres everywhere and everything else. That's all kind of shut down now, and money's going in elsewhere. Do you think, like, the community, the Muslim community, and its young people is just going through what the wider community is facing as a challenge, or is there a difference? Because I remember you mentioned faith-based identity and everything else, which is it is becoming like a hot coal to hold on to.
Yes, and you're right. I think it is. I mean, we don't live in a vacuum. We don't live in a bubble. We have been affected by austerity, nearly a decade of austerity, and the fact that youth services have been decimated across the country. That has affected all young people across cultures and faiths. It's a real tragedy, and it's an indictment on the governments who have implemented this. But beyond that, as you pointed out, we have certain types of subculture that have grown recently. I mean, there's always been, youth cultures have been controversial, at least since, the 1950s and 60s, where different youth cultures emerged in the West, and which were actually emulated outside of the West as well. You had punks and rockers and teddy boys, and certainly with the arrival or the transference of African American urban cultures and the music culture, these ideas have travelled.
Yeah.
So our young people have picked up on these things as well, because we live in a globalized world. And so when it comes to, a very difficult issue that we're going through recently on this knife crime, it has different. It's quite complex, but to keep it simple, I think what we have to bear in mind, young people are our responsibility. It's not just it's dangerous to write them off as criminally minded young people. One of the reasons is because they've got nothing else to do, literally. Yeah. But then there are issues around territorialism, which have always been there. Do you think
people do that too easily, like write young people off?
Yes. It's an easy way of deflecting and abdicating personal responsibility. And I think it's linked as well. I think personally, I believe in a holistic analysis. I think we need to look at our family structures as well, and the fact that one of the things is that this increasing divide between young people and their parents, even second generation, our generation, we either were born here or grown up here. Many parents don't know how to communicate and don't understand what our young people are going through. And that makes it difficult, certainly where there is a disconnect between what they're learning at home and in the masajids and what they're learning in school. They're different cultures in different worlds. Then there's the wider societal impact. You have very, very powerful media messaging and popular culture itself, music, sports, consumer culture. All of these things impact on young people's lives, and certainly for us Muslims, a decade of securitization has had very negative consequences as well.
Do you think? One of the things, and you don't have to agree with what I'm about to say, I personally believe the whole kind of securitization agenda has kind of deflected the attention of the Muslim community into firefighting this thing, and left its normal steady things that it would have done had it just been left on to focus in a normal way. So the time that you would spend with young people, the time you would spend in kind of nurturing a strong family structure and things like that, they're all kind of afterthoughts because you've got this big fire that you need to fight.
I agree actually with you, because it's unfortunate, because it's not just about trying to react constantly to a shifting government security policy. It's the fact that we have so much on our plates. Beyond that, we have the everyday just trying to survive. Especially going back to living in poorer communities, trying to get our children educated, trying and hoping that they go into good professions where they can be financially secure. The fact that, even if you're a graduate in a good job, it becomes very difficult to buy housing, certainly in places like London. These are the material kind of anxieties that we have. But beyond that, I think we have a fear and a sense of what do we do for our kids' moral and ethical lives. The fact that so many of them are disinterested. And here's a new thing, which maybe some of your viewers are not aware of, the fact that there is a very significant cohort of Muslim young people who are leaving the faith. The fact that atheism is actually becoming trendy. And that really is something very serious for us to discuss and to understand and to respond to.
No, absolutely. I think I was going to actually say, in terms of maintaining identity, in my travels I actually do travel quite a lot, and I have seen, perhaps more more obviously in other towns out of London, but I have seen that there is a culture that's growing. Like I said, it is significant. It's not huge, but it is significant for us to actually ask the question: is why are people leaving Islam? I mean, from your just observation, does anything stick out?
Yes. The short answer is that religion has become less and less relevant in people's lives, and there are a number of things going on. But one of the big impacts have been the rise of what they call new atheism, the likes of Richard Dawkins, the scientist. I mean, he is really, has been giving dawah to disbelief really in the last. He's made it his mission to do that, and his friends, people like Sam Harris and Daniel Dennett and a host of other people, and you have ex-Muslims who joined this kind of clique of people who are trying to encourage people to leave Islam. Okay, and it's not just Islam; it's religion generally, but they tend to focus on Islam. So that's one thing. And the other thing we have to remember is that there is a sense of disappointment and disillusionment in Muslim community structures and religious leadership and guidance. So the fact that when we have problems, personal problems, social problems, family problems, who are you going to go to? Your average imam in the local masjid isn't going to have the capacity or the skills to be able to answer these very pressing needs. And the fact that in our communities we really lack the support services, the counselling services, the youth services, the psychological and psychiatric even remedies and professionals who are able to help our young people. I mean, and think about mental health. People don't realise it's becoming a crisis.
It's huge. Yeah.
So where are our youth going to go?
Very good question. Very good question. And I'm going to actually pause you there because we are actually coming up to a break. But I will pick this up after the break. So viewers, do join us after this very short break. Take care. Assalamu alaikum. Just before the break, you were kind of just mentioning this whole raft of challenges that we're facing, and maybe the people in our institutions aren't actually fit for purpose to rise up to this challenge. And you mentioned mental health. You mentioned kind of professional, psychiatric help to people, or even advising people in a professional capacity, because it's not like the good old days, just go and pray and everything will go away. It's too simplistic, and you need to have that training and understanding. And I have seen actually, alhamdulillah, in some institutions that the imams do go through proper training and everything else, and they're qualified therapists and things like that. So it is starting. But I think a lot of people would still come back to that point is that you made, which is that there is a disconnect between how useful is religion in my life and what people are growing. And one of the things I think that contributes to that maybe is language perhaps that is spoken, but more importantly, I think in the Friday sermons in most places in the country, the discussion is something that is not relevant at all to people's lives.
Yes. Well, that's certainly part of the problem, and but at the same time, I think it's unfair to expect the masjid to solve all these problems. In that sense, I do look at the youth issue as a collective responsibility. So, and it's not about apportioning blame to any particular institution or level. I think really first and foremost we need to look at our families and again take ownership and responsibility about relationships we have with our children, because and this has always been a problem when parents themselves are so busy just trying to earn a living, and especially now sometimes where mums have to work as well. Fathers out. Who's looking after children? Who is teaching the children? Who is providing that modelling and embodying the faith and our values and ethics? So, we've grown up perhaps where in families that weren't religious, and maybe our parents said, "Look, you should pray or you should read Quran," but they themselves didn't do it. So that was an issue for us. But now we've got to the point where people are so busy, and there are so many opportunities for young people to spend their time unwisely. So certainly there's time on social media, or if they're hanging around on the streets, nothing to do, there's no youth centres, what are they going to get up to? They will occupy themselves with whatever is available. And the important point is about religious education. Here, the mosques need to do so much more. And again, we have examples of good practice and where we can learn and make religion and what is taught in the after schools massages relevant. Clearly, it has to be done in the English language. It has to be made interesting, stimulating, and equipping them to maintain their identity as Muslims, both at home and when they leave home, when it's in the school, when it's in the college, when it's on the street. That's the challenge. So it is about contextualizing our faith in a way that is relevant.
But also, isn't it important to understand? So, I mean, some of the kind of work I've been doing with regarding Islamophobia, there's been a number of kind of research projects and even some interviews that have been carried out where a lot of young people would say, sometimes explicitly would say or imply that the expectation of them as a Muslim is an added penalty because they're already brown or they're already female or and then on top of that, if I'm visibly Muslim, then it makes my life even harder. And that the social norms are such that I feel embarrassed to be Muslim. And so there's this confidence that's not there anymore.
You're right. You're absolutely right. There is a growing amongst a certain section of youth, kind of religious lack of self-esteem, and the feeling that, look, if I identify as Muslim, it's going to hold me back in life, and that is one of the reasons that feeds into some people leaving Islam, because they feel that they will be penalized, that they will get stopped and searched, they will get stopped at the airport, they will, not be able to get a job, or they will be victims of some kind of Islamophobic hate crime. So these are very, very real issues that our parents need to understand. It's difficult,
But isn't it? So the question really is, I accept it's not for one institution or one segment of our community that needs to deal with it. It's a holistic approach. But isn't it also we need to understand how structurally we're kind of hampered by all of this. So if you just take the example of the media, how it portrays Muslims constantly, and the otherization, and not only that, it kind of also creates the expected how a Muslim should be. So not only do they demonize the Muslims, they also say this is the acceptable type of Muslims as well. So, and media is powerful. None of us are immune to it, and it does have an effect on us. So how do we, knowing that is happening as well, some people think, wow, I just need to give up, stay at home.
It's a difficult one, and I don't think there is one solution. It's a set of different interrelated strategies around confidence building, building pride in our faith identities, helping young people, giving them the tools really to navigate adult life and navigate a very difficult socio-political environment, the period of history that we're going through. So, I mean, basically the teenagers of today and those in their early 20s, they are children of the age of war on terror. People who've grown up in the last 18, 19 years.
That's all they've known,
and they don't know anything else but being demonized, being suspects, being a problem, either potentially being involved in antisocial behavior, drug dealing, other types of problems which are well known, and if every day all you see around you on the news, on the radio, on your internet is Muslims are this, Muslims are that, it does have a corroding, cumulative, damaging effect on your sense of self, and then you begin to think, really, well, what can I do? Is Islam worth it?
What would you?
I think really there's a lot we can do, and I think the first thing is trying to understand, and certainly these kind of conversations, I think we need to have more of them with our elders and parents, perhaps, who do not understand these cultures. So it's about becoming literate. It's about understanding youth cultures. It's about listening to young people, because often young people have the solutions to these problems, but we don't. It's an adult-child kind of thing. We think, well, what do they know? They're kids. But we should listen to young people and respect what they have to say, and then we need to develop structures and support our young people. And that means here's the thing, which is a bit more difficult, is that we need to reprioritize what we do with our money, because it's great that we are constantly raising charity, monies for, and we are the most. We are the
Yeah.
most generous of all communities in the UK,
Alhamdulillah.
giving money in Ramadan and throughout the year. We're building masajids all the time, but
Yeah.
we have to think really. We first of all, when it comes to charity, I think we really need to think about how much of that money we can use here, because we raise hundreds of millions
Yeah,
now,
yeah.
alhamdulillah. But we need to redirect some of the money here to support voluntary projects, youth projects, and all of the community projects that are struggle with money.
Yeah, yeah.
And secondly, we need to think, well, really, do we need to keep building masjids? How about the masajids that we have, making them more accommodating of young people, and especially women, our young women,
Yeah.
you know, giving them, using models like the East London Mosque is an easy one to cite because they're doing so much. You know, making masjids fit for purpose,
Yeah.
bringing in imams who are fit for purpose, who can communicate,
Yeah.
bringing in other services and professionals who are trained to deal with our young people. I think these are the beginning steps.
Yeah, no. It's, I think, you know, what you said is spot on. I had a young imam from Lewisham Islamic Centre, and they're doing one of these kind of great works out there in terms of like going out and actually talking to young people and saying, okay, what do you expect of me? And actually having an imam who's only around 28, 29 as well, so that can relate to younger people. And I think I totally agree. In terms of the reinvestment, how like, I actually agree we shouldn't make any more mosques. We probably have enough, but we should invest in the ones that we have in and making them fit for purpose. How do you see that reinvestment working? Like, you know, is there a body we're looking to do this, or is it that individuals in their own communities they need to step up?
I think it's a bit of both. I think we need to have a broader conversation within the Muslim charity sector. I know these kind of discussions are starting to be had. You know, it has been raised by other people, but I think the real thing is about action and really prioritizing this. Because I've been here, and we've been hearing this for years.
Yeah.
Okay, now we need to do something about it, because as we know, the voluntary sector has less public funding. Okay, and then unfortunately, the monies that are available are often through Prevent.
Yeah,
so you can
securitized
understand,
as well. Yeah.
you know, that comes with strings. And I think, you know, I understand why some youth groups will go there. But isn't that a tragedy?
Yeah.
That we are having to go there and work within those parameters to facilitate the work we should be doing anyway. Really should have been supported by local government and central government. But I think really, more than anything, I would say we Muslims have to become independent and self-sustaining, because we do have the money in our community, even though our communities are still somewhat relatively financially overall, we are not, we could do better. But we do have money, clearly, by the fact that we raise so much money in charity.
Yeah.
That money needs to be reinvested, redirected to our local communities and supporting the good works that are already taking place.
Okay, alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair. That's a perfect spot to actually finish the show on. Jazakallah khair for joining us. And viewers, do join me again next week. I think Dr. Hamid has hit the nail. You know, we've got to reinvest in ourselves. The challenge is every generation will come and go, and they will be different and everything else. But one of the things we've got to do is also look after ourselves and reinvest here. And I think this is a priority. We're here to stay as Muslims. We're not going anywhere. See you soon. Assalamu alaikum.
Alhamdulillah. Barakallah feek.
Watching, we know you.